Okay, as I mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. You can see the little red icon on your screen and probably just heard that audio prompt. Because we have more than 50 people, everyone is muted, but you are free to unmute yourselves. Please put questions in chat and make them public unless there's some reason you need to be anonymous so folks can follow along. I see we're joined by a couple of members of the e-board. Donna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. This is Donna Mensimer. I'm the SEMA secretary, e-board secretary, and an administrative support officer at Roads and Airports Department.
Wonderful, thank you. And I see we have, let's see if we have any other board members here. A former member, Glenn Payne, thank you for your service. And Adam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, folks. Good to see everybody. Adam Cole here, your other SEMA business rep.
And of course, Zeb Feldman, SEMA OE3 business rep. So the budget, or excuse me, the agenda is posted in chat. We'll probably post it again. I see probably 8 people have joined since I last posted that. We have what I think will be a full agenda because there's usually a lot of discussion about return to work and about, pardon me for that, and about telework. But so you can see on the agenda, we've got return to work information. Adam, probably Donna, myself, all have some information to share about that. Telework revision, we have an in-place policy. We're going to talk a little bit about what the county has proposed and then what we've counter-proposed. The classification committee and study update, nursing arbitration follow-up. We have a couple of ideas for upcoming PD events that we wanted to bounce off of you all. And then, of course, a review of the state and county budget, which is looking significantly better than I think anyone dreamed 3, 4, 5 months ago. Do you want to start off, Adam, with the return to work information?
Yeah, happy to. So this, as this is a combined site meeting, kind of specific information will vary a little bit from department to department, and folks will likely have some separate information they've received from their department, but we'll start at kind of the county level overview, which is that if you roll back the clock maybe 1-2 months ago to a site meeting, kind of maybe May, you know, the message that we were getting from the county, from Dr. Smith, from elsewhere, is they were targeting, you know, maybe August for a kind of more mass return to work. That date got moved up last month to July 15th or later, with, you know, specific exceptions for departments that might be able to do a slower rollout. I see some folks from VHP on here, for example. They have a slower timeline than that. But some of our large departments are intending to return to work at this point, July 15th. Hospitals, for example, that's the date they're targeting, and it seems like they're going to hit it. What that means, though, for setting a return to work date is what it effectively means is the county is going to go back to actually enforcing the telework policy that exists, right? So for the last year and 4 months, folks have been kind of teleworking as the default setting, assuming your work's able to be done from home. You know, you're not a nurse providing bedside care, you're not a, you know, probation counselor working at the ranch, you know, whatever. And prior to COVID, we had a telework policy in place that, you know, SEMA bargained 5-6 years before that, and that policy has just been ignored, right, for the most part. Some of the training folks have still had to do, but there hasn't been that approval process. So when the county returns to enforcing it, what that means is that anyone who wants to continue to telework or begin teleworking, I guess if for some reason you weren't and think you should be able to, will need to go through and follow the policy, complete the forms on the intranet, submit that to their manager, and then be approved for some allocation of telework, right? As part of the process, you identify which days in a given week or pay period you want to telework. And then after a conversation with your manager, that will either be approved or not be approved, or some lower level of telework could be offered. So any departments with that return to work date, you know, folks have been and should continue to fill out the telework policy and have that conversation. So hopefully there can be a seamless continuation. That being said, we're seeing somewhat different responses from different departments. There was a meeting with a number of county executives about 2 weeks back, some senior county leaders, where our understanding from speaking with execs who were there was that, you know, one of our leaders in the county took a stronger stance on telework than Dr. Smith has in the past. Generally, Dr. Smith's been reasonably supportive of telework. You know, it's the county's had generally a good experience with telework, especially for SEMA positions over the last year. But at this meeting, there was a stronger stance of we need to get everybody back in the office, and then we'll evaluate telework from that point forward. Keep in mind, all you executives, you know, you can't be providing mentorship to folks effectively when they're working from home. It's, you know, difficult to onboard new staff. You know, you lose kind of the morale and the ability to just, you know, collaborate quickly on things that come up. Some of which are fair points, but that's only one side of the, you know, one side of the equation on the costs and benefits of telework, right? On the other side, we've seen that telework has just been, in some cases, more productive than, you know, status quo was pre-COVID, or at least the same. It's becoming the standard in the Bay Area and around the country. We have nearby counties like Santa Cruz that are going all in on telework, and we're going to be a green county, and so on and so forth. So that hurts our ability to be, you know, an employer of choice in the market here. Reducing carbon footprint, all that kind of stuff, and so forth. So it's clear that there's some kind of division amongst senior county leadership about the topic of telework. And it's significant, I would say, that the date was moved up specifically to this month we're in now, where the board's on recess, right, or hiatus. So with that in mind, your return dates are going to vary from department. We're generally hearing that folks are, you know, been going through and approving and working on those telework applications. So anyone who's interested in continuing, if you haven't already, you should fill that out. For the time being, like I said before, SEMA has a telework policy in place. It was the first one that existed in the county. But the next topic we have on here is that in this context, ESA has approached SEMA and kind of all the other unions that have folks that could potentially be teleworking, and approached us with a new telework policy, right? And what they're looking to do is have a county-wide.
Hey, Adam, before
Yeah.
you hop into the telework revision,
Sure.
let me cover some more points about return to work.
Sure.
So as Adam mentioned, you're going to see a lot of differentiation between departments. So we have some departments that are adamant of keeping people out of the workplace as long as practicable. This bleeds into the telework conversation because some of them will want to get lots of telework approved and keep people out. Not because they don't necessarily want people back in the workplace, but for a variety of reasons that Adam mentioned. Competitors are offering telework, safety, things of that nature, ability to productivity, ability to serve the public. Other departments want people back as soon as possible. So there are some mechanics behind returning to work. One is the return date, right? People can return as early as July. Is it 18th, Adam?
Yeah.
I think it's 18th. It might be 19th, whatever that Monday is. And some departments have limitedly returned even before then. The assessor's office is a good example. I see some assessor's office people there. In some areas, never entirely shut down. DCSS is an example. They've kept their lobby partially open for the entirety of this shutdown. So then there are some other mechanics as to what's involved with coming back. And a question that Adam and I have gotten a lot, or I've gotten a lot, I don't know if Adam has, is who is responsible for enforcing the vaccinated versus non-vaccinated status in the workplace? So what's currently envisioned, and a lot of you have probably been on these calls or have heard this messaging, has been, okay, if you are fully vaccinated, you are not required to wear a mask in the workplace. You're not required to socially distance. Okay, great. But now there's some population of people that are not vaccinated or have declined to state. And they will be treated in all likelihood differently than information we have right now, is they will have to continue to wear a mask, right? So have some personal protective equipment, and they will have to continue to socially distance. So the question we've been getting from supervisors, you know, you all who are managers, supervisors, you manage staff, is it my responsibility to know Hank is vaccinated, Jill is not, Joe is, you know, and sort that whole thing out? What we've been told right now is the answer to that is no. That confidential employees, and we can talk about, if anyone has a question as to who's a confidential employee, we can talk about that later. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it at this moment. Confidential employees, think HR staff, people who have sensitive information, will know who has to socially distance, who has to wear a mask, and who doesn't. And it's their job to enforce that. So it shouldn't be falling on supervisors or line managers to be, walking around the office saying, oh, Jimmy needs to wear a mask, put that mask on now. That should be someone else's responsibility. Sorry, did you want to add to that, Adam?
Yeah, just to point out that the masking rules vary for the hospitals, for example, where large swaths of folks, even if they are vaccinated, will have to continue to wear masks, even if you're vaccinated. But yeah, you can go ahead and continue that.
And also individual departments will have extensive freedom to say, even if you're a county employee and vaccinated, how do we want to appear to the public? And I would encourage you all to as managers to play a role in crafting that policy. So let me give you an example. DEBS, Department of Eligibility Benefit Services, over at SSA, has opted to have their public-facing employees wear a mask, even though that's not required. Let's say you're unvaccinated and you're in one of the big lobby areas, or you're directing the public to various windows to get services. It just strikes you as wrong, right? As a customer, as a consumer of county services, if you walk into a place, the requirement is that all public members of the public, regardless of vaccination status, have to wear a mask. So it kind of strikes you as weird, right? You walk into a place and there's someone without a mask saying, put a mask on and go over here, right? Because you're like, well, how come you're not wearing a mask, right? So if you are a public-facing department, obviously you have professional freedom. Certainly my recommendation would be, it's a good idea to have the public-facing staff wear a mask. If you're providing support in the back office, hey, maybe there's an area out of view that, great, don't wear a mask, be more comfortable at work. But each department is going to be able to make that decision for itself. So just because DEBS at SSA chose to do that doesn't mean that's, in fact, I think Adam had an experience at probation the other day where that was not the case, right? He walks in and is told, put a mask on by a bunch of people that don't have masks on, right? So it just is a weird message.
Yeah, let's pause real quick there for any questions before we jump into the policy.
Okay, yeah, and I see one came through while Adam's reading that. Just as a reminder, please do post questions, especially about the return to work and some of the mechanics of that, and then we'll get into the telework agreement that Adam was starting to go down and where we are in negotiations there. Did you want to, I'm going to start reading this one now. If you can start responding to it, Adam, go ahead.
Sure thing. So Aaron, which department do you work in? It's not clear from the message.
Old Agriculture, Environmental Health. Yeah, SEPA, thank you, Ed.
Yeah.
Okay, so Aaron, you're saying that at your department, and actually this is a good conversation, we've climbed to 90 people. Can you post the agenda again, Adam, in chat?
Sure thing.
If that's being communicated to you all that supervisors are the ones that are going to have to enforce that, we had a meeting with Dr. Smith in Labor Relations last Friday, I believe it was. It might have been Thursday. And that's not what we were being told at that time. So that's certainly, it's not concerning, but it's a shift. I think that a lot is being asked of our supervisors right now. And having supervisors and managers responsible for masks seems silly to me. So Aaron, that's good information. In fact, let me take a note on that. That's good information for SEPA. Are there other folks in departments, if you can post your department right now, that you're being told as a manager or supervisor that you will be responsible for mask enforcement?
Being mask police.
Donna, you're saying roads and airports is requiring you to do that as well?
Yes, so I'm the keeper of the status and was instructed that while you can't share vaccination status, that I had to share with the direct supervisors who is required to wear a mask and who isn't, so that they could meet with those people individually without disclosing their vaccination status, but that they are required to wear their mask, and they are responsible for making sure that their employees wear their masks.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, that just seems contrary to what we've been told. Do you know if that direction is coming from your director? And same thing to Aaron. Is that coming from your director or is that coming from some central authority at 70 West?
I believe that's coming from a central authority.
Okay. I'm also getting a direct message that that probation is getting similar information. As a practical matter, I don't know that that's a bad thing. What I'm concerned about is that I think you all have a lot of information. I mean, a lot of responsibilities right now. And as we're talking about telework, there'll be a lot of administrative responsibilities with that as well. So I just don't know if you have the time to do that. It's just an extra duty. Is that something for folks that are being asked to do that? Probation, Aaron, Donna, is that a duty that you don't mind having, or is that one you'd rather shed? It's kind of a loaded question.
Personally, I don't know where else it would reside. I mean, we're the ones that are in the office seeing, I mean, most of the time.
Mhm.
I think the biggest concern that we have is I actually have SEMA managers who we never had this issue up until this ordinance went out. And all of a sudden they have their line staff refusing to wear it, even if our policy says they're required, and having to get labor relations involved.
So line staff or some line staff, obviously we don't want to lump everyone in. Some and probably some SEMA members too are saying, I simply refuse to wear a mask.
Yep. So they were sent home. They basically said, if you're not wearing a mask, this is the direction from labor relations. You're saying, insubordination. Are you not following through on a county policy and a directive from your supervisor? If they say yes, then you send them home and you work with labor relations on the discipline.
Okay.
Just put out there as a warning to folks. I imagine this isn't anybody in SEMA just refusing to wear a mask, but direct insubordination is one of those cases where you can jump fairly rapidly up the discipline hierarchy determination for just continued refusal to follow policy and a directive. Labor relations here is quite cumbersome and slow, but those are usually pretty open and shut cases.
Yeah. Okay, well, no, I thank you, Aaron, for that clarification. I see no one else would do it. In your case for Rhodes and SEPA, are there confidential employees that would be in a position to do that? Like an HR manager or something local that would be able to enforce this? Aaron's saying yes at his workplace.
No, in our workplace.
Okay. Okay, well, yeah, we'll get some more information out to you all on that. Let's slate that for the e-blast next week.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and jump into the policy piece of this, but if folks have more questions about return to work, you can continue to put those in chat and we'll address them. So I think I was saying before that SEMA, other bargaining groups as well, who have predominantly knowledge workers or some, have received a new policy from ESA around telework, and it's gone back and forth over the last year and a half whether ESA was intending to put a new policy together. So you've likely heard mixed reports on that from us, but they did eventually put a new policy together, and there was an e-blast on this, I think, went out either last night or this morning, so folks may have a little bit of familiarity with it, but I'll run through the key points, which is that the new proposed policy differs in a few main ways from the policy that SEMA currently has, the language we have that was bargained two contract cycles ago. And the main ways that it differs are, one, it's significantly longer and more onerous on employees to follow it to get approved from telework. So it's 47 pages long, which is quite lengthy, and instead of the 2 forms that were required to be filled out under the previous and current policy, it's now up to 10 forms that need to be filled out, which isn't an extreme amount of work for someone who needs to apply. But if you're someone who's going to be needing to review and approve a dozen, 2 dozen of your employees who have telework applications, then that becomes a significant multiplication of your work. So longer and more onerous would be the first piece, which is not good news from our perspective. I think it's more important to us to see to what degree telework is approved in kind of the post post-COVID environment, and we have every expectation it will be and should be higher than it was pre-COVID, right? Given the good experience most departments have had with telework. But it sends, kind of the wrong message when in the post-COVID return to work, it's been made significantly harder to apply for telework than it was before, right? That doesn't directly tell you, how much is going to be approved, but it's concerning. Second major difference is largely positive, though, which is that this policy removes ESA, advice consulting with individual departments as they go through and process these applications. So under the current SEMA policy, ESA often kind of functioned as a bottleneck to getting applications approved. Folks think back 2-3 years ago before COVID, it wasn't an uncommon complaint, at site meetings or that Zeb or I would get that, hey, I've had a telework application that's been, approved by my manager and sitting in ESA's inbox for 6 months, whatever, So removing that bottleneck is one, good. But two, it means that individual departments will largely have discretion about how telework is going to be handled and to what degree it's going to be approved, which I think we would see as largely a good thing. And the reason I say that is, for example, in each of the departments I manage at the executive and director level, leaders in the county are quite supportive of telework and are pushing that decision on individual telework approval down to their department leaders. So I'm the director of a department, manager of a department, and I'm being told I have discretion to find a telework model that works for my department, whatever it is. Is it 2 days a week, 3 days a week, alternating, rotating, whatever, right? That I have that on the ground discretion to sort it out. So that removal of ESA is good, and working with and letting that decision point be the conversation between the employee who's applying and the manager or director is definitely a positive change. So we had our first meeting with ESA about this. I guess that was Tuesday, right, Zeb? About right. The new policy. So because we have existing language on this, we have the ability, if we don't like ESA's language, to just say, no thanks, we'll just stick with our current language and move forward. That being said, I think it would be a shame if that's where we ended up, just because, we see this as an opportunity to get, increased flexibility and a better telework policy than we've had previously. And that should be doable given that the county's, coming off this year of, particularly successful and good experience on the whole with telework, right? And that's the direction that industries are moving right now. The roadblock to that is going to be that ESA has been very clear that they want a one-size-fits-all policy for all bargaining units or groups of employees in the county, which makes it more difficult to make any changes with what they've proposed, right? Because if they want one size fits all, then those changes then need to be run by, every other bargaining unit they're currently talking to. Makes a difficult process. That being said, given the fact that we already have, bargain to telework language, and we have an ability to just default back to it, and that would inherently create, already a multiplication of different telework policies for the county. I would say I think it's pretty likely that we'll be able to make some positive changes in the telework policy. And what our response to the county has been, Zeb did a great job putting together kind of a counter proposal on the telework policy that incorporates some of the feedback and the guidance that we got from members in those telework surveys that we put out. And the goals are to, make the telework policy more flexible, less cumbersome, easier to go through, kind of sequence it so you're not filling out all those forms up front, so on and so forth. So we'll have more information in the coming month for folks about what the county's response ends up being to, that telework proposal that we gave back to them. We had, an initial positive response on some of the changes that we'd made. Others they were less excited about, so we'll see what they come back with. But this is definitely something that we want to take advantage of, like I said, as an opportunity to get an improved telework policy from the one that we had pre-COVID. And I'd say likely one of the biggest positive changes can hopefully end up being the continued removal of ESA from that process. That's a substantive gain from where it was previously. So if we can fix some of the other areas as well, that'll be a big improvement.
And it's this individual who asked the question privately, I think probably a lot of people have that question. So let me just read it and then we can dig a little bit deeper. Is telework only the immediate supervisor or the department manager that needs to approve telework? So that's through the approval process, right? Who needs to be involved? Also, telework forms, I'm guessing because they're being revised, are not currently available, correct? So that's a more nuanced question. Let's start with the second part. Are the telework forms available right now? Yeah, they are, because SEMA already has a telework agreement and it's part of our contract. So the telework forms that are available, and you can go on the intranet at Santa Clara County and just look for SEMA telework and a form will come up. It'll say SEMA and IFPTE. And that's the language that impacts us. There are forms attached. That's the language that we have in place right now. Let's pretend we can't come to any agreement with the county for a revised telework policy. That's what's enforced. That's part of our contract. That's what we agreed upon. That's what happens. If, however, we get a streamlined form that, as Adam pointed out, is sequenced so that it's sequenced in a way that makes sense, right? You apply for telework. If you get it, then you fill out the requests for equipment and, remote access and your attestation that you have a safe, clean place to work. And then after you actually start teleworking, here's your commute log and here's your things that you need to keep track of. So that way you're not filling out all those things up front, especially if you might be denied. You're a janitor or something. That's a job, a particular role that's very difficult to telework. So to answer that question, are the telework forms available? Yes, they are right now. Probably not yet. I wouldn't fill them out yet. If you want to apply, give it another 2 weeks, week or two. And then if we haven't come to agreement, you can probably start filling those forms out with your boss at that time and expect to be receiving those forms. The first part, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was going to get to the next question. Go ahead.
The first part of that, is it only the immediate supervisor or the department manager that it needs to approve telework? No, not according to our current agreement. The proposal, as Adam mentioned, that Labor Relations gave to us removes ESA from that equation. So that's good, right? That's a feature of the 47 pages stinks, and we don't like that. We don't like the 10 forms. We want to consolidate all that. But the one feature that is good is that it removed ESA, who is a current player in the process. So if we come to an agreement, which the county seems amenable to because it's in their proposal, then ESA would be out, and then your statement is correct. It's the immediate supervisor and department manager. Status quo is no, ESA has their finger in the scale.
We had a question from Mario here about, is ESA a feature, or is ESA a feature of the current telework language that folks will be applying under? Yes, but I don't know that they're bothering to fulfill that role right now. Have you heard, Zeb? Are they just kind of de facto backing out of this already?
Well, I can't say. The reason I can't say is that as we all know, the county invoked its emergency powers under COVID and just put a bunch of people out on telework. So that was something that we didn't go through the normal process. So I don't know if ESA has recused itself or not.
Right, but with this return to work and the large batch of applications that I'm sure are coming in right now, is ESA expecting to review those, Mario? I don't know. They're supposed to, based on the policy. They may have just already internally decided they don't have bandwidth for this, and that's why they changed it in the policy going forward. But they're supposed to. Great if they've just decided to bow out of that and just ignore that part of the current policy. That's good from our perspective. We wouldn't complain about it.
Oh, we're getting some other questions here. Aaron is asking, are there significant differences in telework policy's perspective of a set schedule versus one-time only telework approved each time? Do you fill out the decision form each time? So no, the current policy, what Aaron's referring to is you kind of have to be familiar with the current policy and how that works. For any of you that have gotten it, you'll see that there's like a section. So it'll say Monday, Zeb is approved for telework. Tuesday, he's not. Wednesday, he's not. Thursday, he's approved. So it's very rigid. That's something that we are trying to change. It's not a feature of the current contract, Aaron. If you, it sounds like you have some familiarity with it. The current one is you state the days that you are working, like, remotely, however you want to phrase that, telephonically, I don't know. And then you actually have to spell out the tasks that you are doing on that day, which just really doesn't work for the majority of our members, right? We're very project oriented. It's like if someone said to me, Zeb, tell me exactly what you're going to do next Thursday. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't look at my calendar and figure out what's, what I'm responding to, if there's a site meeting, if we're lobbying the board, whatever it's going on, right? So we're trying to get that to be much more flexible, where I don't know if we'll have this, but where there might be some room to maneuver with the county is we can say salaried workers are treated a little bit differently. And as you know, 95+% of our salary is, of our membership is salaried. So the current is no, Aaron. You have to be very specific as to what days you're off. We want flexibility in that, which is partially what we proposed. And also we want more vagaries, if you will, as to what duties you're performing. Thank you, Donna, for the link. Any sense of when the new policy might be implemented?
So it's likely not right around the corner, Jill. We have likely at least one more meeting with the county before anything's settled upon. If they just show back up next time we meet and say, yes to 4 out of the 5 things you were looking to change, then we could be done. But there might be additional meetings. We'll see. And then it's up to ESA whether they want to, get concurrence from every union before they implement the policy countywide, or if they want to implement it piecemeal. Given that their goal was to have a universal policy, I wouldn't be surprised if their perspective was, we'll roll this out once everyone agrees to it, right? Or if we get individual changes, then maybe it'll get implemented for us first. That decision will be on ESA's side, how they want to approach that. So could be as little as 2 months, could be longer.
I think I'm gonna, and I've been wrong every time I've gone out there and thought ESA is going to be super efficient, but I'll go out on a limb on this one. I think that ESA has a big incentive to get this done quickly. So I think we will see a turnaround in far less than 2 months. I would guess a month on the outside. And here's why. I see Adam grimacing. and here's why I think that. There are only 3 unions that I'm aware of that have current telework policies: us, IFPTE, and SEIU. So for everyone else, it's an enhancement, right? All other bargaining units, the employer is saying, here's a benefit to your employees. We're just implementing this. If you don't like it, your employees don't have to take advantage of it. Whereas they have to sit down with us, IFPTE, and SEIU and say, here's an alternative that we, the county, are proposing to your current telework agreement. Do you buy off on it? So I think that politically the board wants some kind of settlement to this. I think that as we're coming back to work, many departments philosophically want the maximum number of people to be teleworking. And then there are there are some departments that are the absolute opposite of that, right? So TSS has taken not a bold position, but a position that we want as many people as possible to be continuing to telework wherever it makes sense. Some department that's taken the exact opposite approach of that, who I see 1 or 2 members on this call, is 911 County Comm, right? Where they're like, but for the pandemic, we never would have had anybody teleworking ever. Everyone get your butts in the chairs and make those, take those 911 calls. So anyway, that's my editorialization on that. Okay, any other questions on telework? I see something just came in. This is a private one. Let me read this, Adam. Do you want to, what's the next thing in the agenda?
Class studies,
Okay, do you want to give an update on that one?
sure thing.
Thank you.
So likely no update on this from the last combined site meeting that we had. We haven't have our second meeting. I think it's like next week, but shortly with ESA about these are the pending class studies for the new process. We had most of them that we submitted approved and signed off on at our first meeting, but there were 20% of them that we'll need to have additional conversation with ESA about. We didn't get to them in the time that we initially had, or there were some questions on them. So update at the next site meeting for that process. At this point, the 1 year turnaround time is in place. So, ESA taking some time to, or I would say pushing the second meeting out is just kind of cutting into their time to complete these. But that's where we're at. With currently pending class studies, we've seen, a reasonable kind of clip turnaround pace on class studies. I see maybe a couple a month. We still have, 40 probably pending class studies sitting out there, which is down from 60 maybe we had around this time last year. So they're working their way through those. But there's still a number of them that are sitting out there in that position of, been pending for 3 or 4 years at this point, waiting for a response. ESA is working on those. We continue to, the ones that have been sitting out there the longest, they're addressed at us, at the monthly meetings we have with ESA to review class studies. If anyone's interested in, an individual update on your currently pending class study, this isn't for folks who just applied. This is for people who have been undergoing class study. You're always welcome to reach out to me or Zeb, and we can let you know what the last update was on that class study. I would say kind of the latest cause of delays and why they were expecting to have the rest of them from the previous process done by now is down to a couple different reasons. One, just, everyone getting busy with COVID, rapid hiring process. These folks do those same work. But also a number of our oldest class studies have been reassigned in the last 6 months due to turnover within HR or new folks coming in. And in some cases, and I know this has been a point of frustration Zeb had on a recent class study, that in that shuffle between people, they just, I think, misplaced all the work that had been done thus far, had to go back and redo it. And that's, no excuse for that. But yeah, we'll hopefully see most of those wrapped up by the end of the year for the currently pending ones. You had a question, Zeb, and folks can put any questions on classifications in chat.
Yeah, so this one came in, it was a private one, I've homogenized it. My department is giving direction to allow X days of a week of telework and no more. Is this appropriate? So it's a fine line. Is it appropriate? It's allowable. That's how I'd phrase it. The department is allowed to say, as you are, as an individual manager, I want no telework in my unit. I want as much telework as possible. So they can certainly put guidelines on it. I would want to, what you are entitled to is an explanation as to why your telework was refused. And that's a feature of our contract. It is, however, the decision of the department. So this is not a right. It's not like vacation time, as an example, where you have a right to your vacation time, but you don't have a right to take it at a specific interval, right? You accrue time and you can say, can I have next week off? And the employer can say no, but they have to allow you to use that negotiated benefit before you start hemorrhaging it, right? That's not the case with telework. They could simply say, no, I am not interested in telework, period. You may do that as a boss, or your boss may do that to you. What I have found is in the past, they've been unsuccessful with just saying business need. They have to actually have a legitimate reason. Also, something else that's prohibited are blanket denials. So they can't just say, no one in SSA will ever have a telework schedule, period. So don't even bother asking. They have to evaluate each application on its own. So those are the two pieces that have to occur. I hope that answers your question. If not, post more questions about that in chat.
And the suggestion that we had, I think, in the e-blast that went out about this was at the departmental level. So not just that I specifically didn't get telework for some reason, my manager told me, but at your department or at your unit level, if you're seeing the same or less telework than was approved prior to COVID, and there's not some great reason like where nurses providing patient care, something like that, then in those cases, reach out to Zeb, myself, or whenever we get our third business rep, that individual. And those are instances where we'll be looking to escalate, through labor management meetings to figure out, hey, why is, such and such director manager not on the same page with telework has been effective and a benefit to the county, and we should see increased approvals from last year given our good experience, right? So those will be the cases where SEMA is looking to try to intervene.
And this is a great question that just came through again, back to the telework. If telework is approved, is a department required to provide equipment, scanners, computer monitors for use with laptop, et cetera? No, they're not required to. There's an equipment request form, and you may request equipment that would be required for you to do your work. And then there are ancillary things that you can request, but there's no obligation for them to approve it. If they approve telework, they ought to give you a mobile device, meaning like a cell phone or something, and a computer. It could be a laptop, it could be a desktop. I mean, I don't know why they'd give you a desktop, but I guess they could if they're trying to like shift old inventory or something. Mm-hmm. But no, in terms of scanners, extra computer monitors, ancillary keyboard, mice, whatever, you can request that, but there's no obligation for them to provide it. The current telework policy does state that they have to provide normal office stuff. So like you could go in and say, I need 1 ream of printer paper and I need some staples or something, right? And you could get a little bit, and whoever administers that would allow you to take that home. Most people aren't doing that. So think about it this way. You get some way to do your work. And if something is required for your work, that's very likely to be approved. So if you're somebody who has to scan an OCR documents, if the county is approving you to telework, then they have some obligation to give you a scanner, right? They might say, no, I've got some super, I mean, we all know scanners aren't very expensive, but let's pretend there's some super expensive piece of equipment. I'll pick on TSS where they print those warrants. That's a hugely expensive printer, and it's got the super fancy like cardstock and all this stuff. They're not going to give you one of those babies to take home, right? Or it's like, give me my $300,000 printer and my reams of special inked paper. But if it's something incidental, right, like a desktop scanner, they very likely will. Long-winded way, no requirement, but you can request.
That being said, something to keep in mind, and this will be one of the things that we likely poll folks about, 2 years from now, as we're gearing up for negotiations again. Some kind of language on this for a kitty fund or something like that for folks to spend on telework equipment that they want to get but isn't required, could be a viable proposal for negotiations in, a post-COVID increased telework world. And if that's something folks are looking for, that's definitely a priority that, you can indicate when we're getting ready for negotiations next time.
Good question. Is there any drawback to submitting telework forms now? No downside I can see. The downside is you might be required to fill it out again. That's the downside. So to me, it's a pretty modest downside if you get approved now.
Yep.
Okay. Nursing arbitration, Adam?
Yeah, I think we likely have some public health nurses on here, but this update likely won't affect them. I don't think we have any of our case managers on here. But a small update on this. So June 16th, most, but not all of our nurses received payment of the arbitration award, the bonus that should have been received last May 4th. And there's been some eBlast updates on this that I'm recapping here, but about more than a quarter, a little more than a quarter of our nurses just didn't receive the award, the bonus, and that seems to be anyone who went through a classification study in the last 2 years seems to be the nexus, and then a couple just danglers here or there that got left off for oversight mistakes on payroll and labor relations part added onto that. So more than 50 people, and this is an extreme point of frustration with us. Over the last year, you've heard us say a number of times that wasn't necessarily evident that county council, for example, was trying to drag this process out. Members were asking us if that was the case. Hey, why is the county dragging this out? Are they intentionally just trying to delay to save money or something like that? And you've heard us say previously, I don't think that was the perspective that county council came into this with, for example. They were trying to problem solve and find a solution with us on a settlement, and we didn't end up there. But just particularly since we won the award, we've seen, just kind of unacceptable delays and oversights, ongoing now on the county's part with implementation of this award, which is extremely frustrating. And something that we're escalating, up to county executives and the board of supervisors. So in the aftermath of realizing, hey, about a quarter of our folks didn't get the award, which is one, unacceptable because the specific number of people who should have gotten it was a major feature of the arbitration, and the specific dollar amount this was going to cost, because they calculated it during negotiations, was also an important feature of the arbitration. And it's like the rules of math didn't somehow change in the last 4 months, and now it's going to cost you 25% less, right, and affect fewer people. And furthermore, that there's only two groups that folks can fall into here, right? One group being people who got the bonus, a year and a half ago appropriately, the other group being the ones who should be getting it now. There's no daylight in between those two groups to slip, 50, 60 people through and say you somehow magically neither fall into either of these groups, right? But despite that, it was, an unfortunate, week of, hashing this out with labor before they finally agreed that, this was correct in their oversight and they should have paid this group. And unfortunately, we still, as of today, don't have a date as to when we're expecting payment. At hazard and say, just from kind of some of the conversations I've had with, our folks over in payroll who are quite busy, sometime in July. But frankly, it should be on labor relations to be directing payroll. This is your top priority right now. We have a legal requirement to pay this as soon as practicable, and they're dropping the ball on that. So extremely frustrating. For anyone who's not sure if they should have gotten the bonus and didn't get it, like I said, we found some stragglers elsewhere, people who should have gotten it and just didn't for an oversight. Feel free to reach out to me and we'll get you added onto the list of people who need separate checks cut. Anyone who has since retired, since May 4th, but was eligible at the time, SEMA's reached out directly to all those folks with, last known contact information to let them know there's a check waiting for them at the controller's office. They got to show up with an ID to get it. In some cases, we're not 100% sure. We left messages at mailboxes that are still being checked. So if you just happen to be in contact with someone who's a nurse who has retired in the last year, worth just letting them know, hey, SEMA's, reached out to you, sent you a letter and called you, you got some money available for you. You can give Adam a call if you have questions, if that applies to you. Would be very helpful. I'm sure they would appreciate it.
And that's super important because, whenever people leave county employment, sometimes they move to other places. A lot of you have relationships with folks that are deeper than Adam and I do, right? You worked alongside someone for 5-10 years before they retired or whatever it is. So you're in contact with them. And that's really helpful. There's a few retirees or people who have separated that are like really on the ball and calling us all the time. Where's my check? Right. But there are also that other population where we've tried to get a hold of them and it's crickets. Right. And they're leaving that's cash on the table, right? It's somewhere between $2,500 and $5,800, somewhere in that neighborhood.
It'd be between 4 to 6. I don't think we have any nurses that would fall into tier 1. But yeah, it's, money I'm sure folks would be happy to have.
Congratulations, well-paid nurses on the call.
Yep.
Okay, one quick thing, again, to a lot of telework. Guys, if you can put a lot of these things are not private, so do feel free to post them in general chat. Because I don't see anything that would like harm you to post, right? But so here's a question. Can SEMA push for full-time telework? Yeah, that's something that I don't want to say we're pushing for. It's something that's allowed under the current telework agreement. I think it's going to be extremely rare. There are a couple classes I'm familiar with that are effectively 100% telework, both pre-COVID and one will be post-COVID. But I think that's still going to be a really boutique type situation. I don't think that it's going to be 20% of our membership are going to be 100% telework post-COVID. I'd be shocked if that happened. There's some opportunity for that to happen in TSS, and I will be pleasantly surprised if that's what ends up happening. But I would just be, like I say, I would be shocked.
Yeah, and there's been some messaging against full-time telework from, county executive's office. We had areas, for example, that were gung-ho about the idea of, permanent telework for a number of their employees kind of several months ago. Think about areas like VHP. But even those areas are now saying, yeah, we'll likely need folks in the office at least, one day a week, something like that, even for people who are, sitting in front of a computer dealing with patient charts all day or doing whatever, something that can be done remotely very, very effectively and more productively. So yeah, I think it's while we do have some areas that are permanent telework and have had them since even before COVID, I don't see it likely that number is going to substantially increase, just given the directives from further up the county.
Thank you, Mario. That's good to know that the current training is saying that it is not likely or is not intended to be full-time. I think that's probably true. It's not intended to be. The forms allow it to be, I guess, is how I probably should have more precisely phrased that.
And it's been allowed in some cases. Like I said, we have departments that do full-time telework, not a lot, but
a person is privately asking, my department is asking for explanations justifying telework. Is that normal? Is that allowed? The answer is absolutely. So the county is a little bit not behind the times, because telework is not a right. And many folks that are on this call, your positions absolutely lend themselves to telework. We have a lot of positions that don't, right? You're a park ranger supervisor. You can't really do that remotely. You can't build trails or roads remotely. I don't know how you'd supervise the fleet bays at FAF remotely. Maybe those are the types of jobs that lend themselves to maybe one day a pay period or one day a week, where the times that you're doing your admin stuff or you're ordering supplies, or you're doing payroll, whatever, maybe that's where you would. But so I just, we've made a lot of progress. For those of you that have been with SEMA for a while, 8-9 years ago, and there are some folks that really deserve credit for this. For those of you that remember, our current president, Dolores Morales, was in the telework conversations. Former member Lucy Silva was a big advocate for telework. And they got this through. At the time, the head of ESA said, "Over my dead body." That was a quote from him. I was in the room when he said that. And we got telework approved as a pilot program. Then it got approved as a feature of our contract. Then SCIU and IFPTE followed suit and got it in their contracts. And now it's going to be a feature for all Santa Clara County employees as a possibility. So we're moving the needle, right, towards telework as a way of life. It's here to stay. It's a feature of employment. Many positions will be eligible for, or will be approved for it, not just eligible. But we're not at the same place that probably some of your colleagues are, or your spouses, where they're working for a company that's maybe saying, "You're all telework, don't come back next year."
Yep.
Right, which is also a very different thing. Jael says, do you know what approach bigger departments SSA are taking baseline days in office? So there's not a baseline guidance for, I can speak for SSA and TSS, the two examples you used. Maybe Adam can speak for VMC. SSA and TSS are not saying like no more than 2 days a week, no more than 4 days a week, no more than what, there's no guidance going out department wide. individual managers may be saying that, but there's no department-wide guidance for that.
Yeah, that applies around HHS too. Like I said, the message we've heard from executives and senior leaders in SEMA, I've heard reiterate this. This is their directive. Figure out what works for your department, and do that. That being said, do folks have the impression that they'll be looked at sideways if they send 100% of their staff home 9 days out of 10 in a pay period? That very well may be the case, right? You know, if that's just more than anybody else in your agency has, there could be some of that kind of pressure or perspective there. But I think those are the kind of things we'll see play out as departments start to make their long-term approvals for this. And that's that other piece of the equation we don't have right now. That's, I would say, kind of the more important piece, right? Which is we can try and build the best, you know, mousetrap or policy in this case that we can, but the actual rate of approval, what actually ends up happening, is going to be equally as important or more important. So that's, you know, that's where we're saying where departments are going the wrong direction on this from where they were pre-COVID. That's where we want you to reach out and let us know.
And yeah, someone just texted me, which is a good point. They're interested in the last item on the agenda, which is the budget. Generally, it's all, this is an exaggeration, but roses and rainbows, in the sense that, you know, we wind the clock back 3-4 months. We were really looking at some serious budgetary impacts, that where we would see a continuation of a hiring freeze, likely additional contraction of the workforce, meaning fewer extra help hours, relying on people to retire and not backfilling those positions, deleting them. State budget came in much better than anticipated. Federal government's printing money with the American Recovery Act and dispersing it to the states and counties, which is leading to inflation, amongst other things. And we've got, on top of that, the property tax roll closed up at approximately 4.8%. If there's someone here in the assessor's office, yell at me and correct that number. Originally, the estimate was 1%. Yeah. So tax rolls are doing much better than anticipated, as are the federal and state coffers. Federal, not so much, but they can print money and we can't. So you don't have to worry about layoffs for the foreseeable. I would go out on a limb and say for the next 2 quarters. I think for the next 2 quarters, we're looking at rebuilding some of the VSIP losses and rehiring those positions that were frozen. Yeah. So generally good news about the budget. It's going to be, how do we slowly begin expanding again, as opposed to preparing for the worst? So generally really positive news. Mm-hmm. I'm still going to be somewhat pessimistic on this, just so this doesn't surprise people. I've stated before this, the current state of the Santa Clara economy, let's be narrow, mystifies me, because we have 2 dilemmas, right? On the one hand, we've got property taxes increasing at a significant clip. Now we're starting to see significant inflation. Fine, those kind of cancel each other out. But we also have this backlog of people that have not been able to pay rent during the pandemic. And we just saw that the state is going to pay landlords some portion of rent, in order to prevent people from being evicted. But we still have a lot of unemployed people, or people who can't afford a year's back worth of rent, that are still unaddressed. So it remains to be seen how that will impact us. But generally, much better news than I would have expected. Probably many of us on the call would have 3-4 months ago. So good news, and don't panic, everybody. So.
Yeah, and just other kind of directly relevant to SEMA and what we're expecting, good indicators. We've seen other unions who've closed contracts recently get reasonable terms during the kind of the height of the COVID pandemic year, fiscal collapse year. Unions were just getting nothing on the table, right? Saying status quo, we don't have any money to offer you, or 1%. CIR closed a couple months ago. They're the interns and residents over at the hospitals. They closed and got 3% per year for their several year contract with some other goodies, which is, kind of the baseline to feel like you did okay, right? That's what SEIU got more or less, pre-COVID. So that's a good indicator. And then secondarily, I imagine we likely talked about this at the last combined site meeting with the management analyst and management aid class study, Zeb.
Huh?
Yeah, and that's a class study that's going to have a significant, several $100,000 impact, very likely on the county budget. And one thing that we've said in the past is that, a sign of, worrying budget times will be if, there's some directive from HR, don't spend any more money on class studies, until you get the say so from us. And that clearly hasn't happened, right? Which is good, relevant news to people going through that process, for example.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're at 103. Just a reminder, like Zeb said, it's always, please put questions in chat. I know I got some directly messaged ones. I hope we got to all of them.
I think this would be a good place to stop since I'm recording as well and I have to hop on another meeting. But thank you all for attending. I really appreciate, I want to say to everybody, I really appreciate the questions. It always makes the site meetings much more interesting when it's a back and forth. And something we didn't hit on, but I intended to at the beginning. In fact, we should probably remind ourselves, Adam, to do this for agenda. We're going to start having site meetings in person again. The popularity of these being webcast, or excuse me, video cast, we'll have, I think what we're going to settle on is we'll have it in person, but then we'll also have a webcam set up, near the front of the room or something like that, so people can view and also ask questions. And we'll have one of our liaisons or board members in attendance field questions as well. So I think that will really increase our reach, but we will be getting back, I believe, in August to an in-person site meetings as well, for those of you that missed them. Although according to this group, it seems like there's a lot of interest for everyone to telework, so we might not see anyone at the site meetings, depending on how that goes.
Yeah. And I think depending on site, we'll see how many of them on a regular basis we're able to also do the webcast for. But we'll definitely at least have, continue the practice of having one site meeting recorded and uploaded to YouTube per month. So if you're not able to attend one, you can catch up as well. So that'll definitely continue into the future.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.